Title belts to Hall of Fame. Doug and Tommy carved the name. Fists of fury and hearts of gold. Every story, every fight retold. Tales of glory, laughter, and pride. Tennessee warriors with hearts open wide. In the ring or on the air, legends living without a care. On the mic they roar, on the map they soar. Dangerous conversations, fans want to know. Gas kings ruling the waves. Memphis wrestling raising the stage.
Hey everybody, welcome back once again to Dangerous Conversations with Dangerous Doug Gilbert. And Doug, this week we're going to be going without Tommy again. He's got some stuff going on, which is my fault. We couldn't record on our normal night because I've been under the weather for a week and a half now. So I couldn't do the night that we normally do. And now I had to move it to a night that unfortunately Tommy couldn't do. So I totally take the blame for it, but we got to get it in because now we don't have much more time before this thing's got to come out.
No, Gene, you're fine. Tommy's a busy guy too. And I know you've been busy, you've been a little under the weather, but man, everything's been going pretty well. And I was going to tell you, I think we're going to talk about a few Japan things tonight. And I was going to tell you, you're kind of like Ribera Steakhouse now. I look behind you, and we used to say, and it was kind of a running joke, you know, whoever went in there, like we'd call like before we go to the show or after the show and say we're coming over there. And every time we go over there, they'd have all of our pictures up in different places. And people said, you know, they just take other people's down and put y'all's up at different times, right? So I'm looking at your background today, Gene, and I think you're doing like Rivera. Usually you have my picture or Tommy's picture up. Now you got EPW and USWA, so you have been a little puny and forgot to put our pictures back up or something.
Well, the USWA one stays up. I've been doing some stuff for EPW with Neil, so I put the EPW one up. And I started to take it back down, but the one that's not, well, two things. One, nobody sees this shit anyway because we're just doing audio. Number two, that's still the old logo that we've kind of moved away from now that, you know, you and Tommy are both on the show. That's the original one we had, so it's kind of out of dated anyway. So eventually I'm going to get another one that's got you and Tommy both on it, and I guess I'll have to rotate these things out depending on what show I'm doing. But like I say, I don't ever really have to have it up for this because people can't see us.
Right. Well, now, Gene, and also, though, I hear you kind of, have you got a tux or something now? You're a big-time commentator out here at the EPW and everything.
I'm just a fill-in from time to time. I wasn't able to go I was supposed to go down there this past weekend and do some backstage interviews and things like that. But this kidney stone I've had for over a week, there was no way I could do a 6.5 hour round trip in a car. So I had to bow out of that one. And then of course we had to reschedule this. And so I finally gotten some relief. I finally passed it and I'm feeling a little better now, but yeah, I'm doing some stuff with EPW. They're, great promotion. They're constantly growing. My good buddy Neil, I'm doing some stuff online with him as well for EPW. So, you know me, I always have something going on, and I try to keep track of it all.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And Neil's a good guy. He runs a good promotion, has great shows. And I think me and Tommy will be down there with him and yourself November 21st and 22nd. So I'm looking forward to in a few months going down to Mississippi and doing a few things and everything. We've got different things that we'll plug next week. Me and Tommy's going to be here for a couple of weekends. I say here, down here in Tennessee, with me for a couple of weekends coming up in September and October. So that's a real cool deal. And we've got our radio show. It's really taken off and everything. And that's a good thing. It's on Roku and Apple and it's on about 4 different streaming networks. So that's really cool. We do it on Wednesday nights from 8:05 to like 9:30, and that's really cool. And we watch different matches, and me and Tommy tell our stories about them and about the whole cards and everything. And it's kind of a cool deal, Gene. I can't wait sometime that you're on there with us, or whenever we get your schedule right where you can be on there.
Yeah, man, I've heard a lot of good stuff about it. And if you want to find it, you can go to DougGilbertPodcast.com, and there's a link right there you can click to go find the radio show, Dangerous Conversations.
Right.
Doug and Tommy are everywhere right now. If you want to hear some great stories, there's plenty of avenues to do it right now with these guys. So today's episode is one that I've been wanting to do for a while. You know, everybody first and foremost, when they think of Doug Gilbert, they think of Memphis. Think of USWA, even though you've done a lot of things. But
right.
Close second to that, you have spent a lot of time in Japan, as much as any American wrestler that I can think of that isn't named Stan Hansen.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted to do a bit of as the kids say now, a deep dive into that topic. So, what year did you start? Was it 91 where you first went to Japan?
90, Gene.
90, okay.
The end of 90, and then 91, I started going like every 3 months I would go. But back then you got to realize we'd stay like from 26 to 35 days was a basic tour. I mean,
Wow.
They was, nice tours, which I mean, for all the promotions, for Baba, for Inoki, for Wing, for FMW, and everything. I mean, some of them would have a few shorter tours, which would be like 3 weeks, but back then that was like a short tour, and the longer tours would be like 5 to 6 weeks and everything. But I mean, man, it's really cool. Which the deal was like in our contracts and our work visas, it would say that we could work 5 nights a week, but it would say on there, wrestle 5 nights a week. So you would have two nights during that period off. But usually those 2 nights you would travel like across Japan, like, to a different side of Japan and everything. I mean, you're talking about, I don't want to say the trips were brutal or nothing, but it was a lot of hours. I mean, you might ride on a bus 10 or 12 hours to get to where you was going, and then, check in a hotel during the day, then maybe wrestle that night. But I mean, there was some good trips, and a lot of the trips you would go, Gene, like I said, more than not, you would have a bus, and like, I was in the office for quite a bit of that, or I'd go in the van with some of the office guys, or a lot of times we would get, like after the matches, we would get on a boat and take the boat, like the bus is on a boat, and the boat it was like a hotel. They had rooms on the boat, and we'd get like nice rooms and everything on the boat and everything. Then you'd ride the boat like around Japan to get to the other side, ride it like 5 or 6 hours. So we did a lot of traveling over there.
That's cool. So, when you first started going, like when you first got booked over there, I mean, you can't, they just like you get booked somewhere in the States, you just hop in the car and you go. What was the preparation for that? I know you got to get a passport and you got to pack enough for, like I said, you're there 30, 35 days. Like, did you really know what to expect? How did you get that? Who did you go through? How did you land that first booking?
Well, I went through. I'd always talk with Tokyo Joe, which he booked for kind of all the offices, but he was a big Inoki guy, a big Baba guy. But I mean, he would help some of the independent promotions and everything. And so, wound up there was a guy, and his name was Ibaragi that run the Wing organization, and he had done Japanese magazines like Gone Magazine, Baseball Magazine, the two magazines over there. Like when you're here in the States, it's Pro Wrestling Illustrated. Then you had like 4 offs of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which, Bill Apter was kind of over. When Japan, Gene, you had Baseball Magazine, which, a lot of people think Baseball Magazine, well, you talking about baseball? No, Baseball Magazine was a pro wrestling magazine and everything. But you had the 2 magazines over there and everything. And I mean, they had their own camera guys that would come to all the shows. Like I said, it was Baseball and Gone. That was the 2 wrestling magazines. But from cover to cover, which, the Japanese books kind of are backwards, as far as the front page and the back, and it goes vice versa and everything. But man, and a lot of people would come to all the different shows and everything. And we got a lot of good coverage over there in Wing. And there was a lot of good talent. Like they had a good connection with the Spanish, with the Mexican companies, and like Mil Mascaras would come over with us, Dos Caras, I mean, Silver King, Tejano, trying to think of most of their big stars for all the different EMLL, AAA, all the different companies in Mexico. A lot of them we had good connections, which our office did with all of them. And man, that they was, I think Japan's second language is not English, it's Spanish and everything. And so they had a real good connection with the luchadors, and a lot of them would come over with us. And then the cool thing about 95, Gene, they asked me to help book the American talent. So from 95 on, I kind of helped book the talent that I thought was good. And I mean, I booked some younger guys, but I got the legends that had drawn money for Bob and Inoki over there. And that was a really cool deal. And also the MMA guys, because, MMA got so popular out there and everything.
So,
but I had no idea. Your question was, did I have any idea what I was getting into? I remember riding back the first trip. I was riding back from Louisville, Kentucky on Tuesday night, and I was flying out of Memphis Wednesday morning, and I rode back from. I rode up there with like Brian and somebody, but they were staying up there, so I rode back to Nashville with Frank Morrell and Jeff Jarrett. And I was coming back, and Frank had went to Japan, a handful of times and everything. And he asked me, he said, "Doug, you know what you're getting into?" And I said, "Oh, Frank, everybody just told me whatever they do to me." My dad's logic and everything was, "Son, because my dad had been over there quite a few times, said, whatever they do to you, just to do it back harder." He said, "They're going to test you." He said, "The whole thing, anything they do to you, everything in Japan is about heart. You have a good heart and being a good fighter, being a strong fighter." And just said, anything that anybody does to you, make sure that you do it back a lot harder than them. And that's the respect, and they respect you if you do like that.
Yeah, that's what I've always heard. It's a very different style over there. Like in America, I mean, even when guys work hard, but there's still that element of working the crowd, making sure you're bringing the crowd into it, heel crowd work. But that's not really how it works in Japan, right? I mean, it's action and the fans react, but you're never gonna like get somebody over there and rake their eyes and, "Hey, what do you think of that?" type stuff over there.
Hey, here's the thing, Gene. I mean, they will sit there and they will watch, and they will be like me, not talking for that second. It is that quiet. If they will sit there, if you're not doing something, and what I'm saying, they won't make a lot of noise. They're real respectful. But once you do something that they like or they think is really something tough or hard or something, every one of them at the same time will go. and then all of a sudden you hear the clapping, you hear it real good, and all of a sudden they stop. And then here you are wrestling it. But every time you do something that looks great and is strong, and like I'm saying, let's say the Japanese style, and let's say the strong style as far as, just being, but everything in Japan, I mean, if you want to get over there, you lay everything in, you're rough. I mean, people's asked me like about, my joints and about different things that hurt. Well, I think everybody that went to Japan quite a few times, has a lot of like joint problems and everything, because I mean, they will pull your shoulders and your elbows and your knees. And I mean, they will kick you as hard as they can right in your knees, in your elbows, in your shoulders, in your head. But Japan is just one of those places, like I said, one thing that I loved so much about it, Gene, was all you had to do was work hard and just try to act right. What I mean by try to act right, you didn't want to get in any trouble, but what I'm saying, the office wanted you to act right. And as long as you halfway acted right, there was really no politics involved, as long as you worked hard. Now, if you didn't work hard, it was simple for you. You just wouldn't come back. I mean, they just wouldn't book you again. But as long as you worked hard, the politics kind of stayed out of it. You know what I'm saying? So you didn't have to worry about, well, I'm not going to come back because such and such don't like me or whatever, because as long as you worked hard and everything and the people liked you, they would bring you back.
So you weren't fighting for your spot as far as politically. Or,
no.
I made this guy mad in the dressing room, they're not going to book me. As long as you're working hard, that's all that office cares about.
Right. I mean, you'd be fighting for your job in the ring, fighting some of them guys, but it wasn't politically. fighting for your job. Because like I said, the main thing, and pretty much it was one of them deals like, Gene, like a lot of the guys that I booked, you had to book and look and see who had been there before and what they'd done before. And knock on wood, I got some pretty dang good guys. When you get Terry Funk to go with you quite a few times, and he's like and I hate to say it's like a godly figure. So is Dick Slater, Dan Severn, Tiger Jeet Singh, which a lot of people don't know Tiger, but he was a really over guy over there for Baba Ananoki, like a crazy man that and everything. And he had a Japanese partner that was with him his whole career. His name was Wada, and he bleached his hair blonde and everything. But they was like, two of the top heels and everything. But like the guys that I just named off, Gene, they was like some of the most over guys ever over there. I mean, Slater, they love Slater. They sure love Funk, but they love Slater. Slater was a real respected guy. But knock on wood, I got to bring, and these two guys are two of the more respected guys that had ever went over there. I got to bring them Bill Eadie and Dick Murdoch as a tag team. They was in the tag team tournaments for All Japan. They was like a tag team over there for a lot of, every year I think it was October that they had their All Japan tag team tournament. They'd bring like 13 or 14 tag teams. It was freaking super good, which, I mean, during that time you had, and I hadn't even named this name, like All Japan had Steve Dr. Williams and Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and they'd win a lot of their stuff. Well, I wound up bringing Gordy over for our company, and man, he was another guy that was super over and everything. And I mean, you couldn't, we wanted to build young guys, but you couldn't build guys like Terry Funk, Terry Gordy, Dick Slater, Dick Murdoch, Bill Eadie is a mass superstar. Oh man, I love Gene going out. Like I'd go out after I worked, I'd take a quick shower and I'd go up in the balcony and I would sit and watch all the rest of these guys. Like after my match, and just see the reaction and see what they've done. And man, it was just freaking, you would have loved watching Murdoch and Bill Eadie in tag matches against different guys, from the young guys, that was kind of green, to the main event guys. And I mean, the people would get with them. It didn't matter who there was against, whether it be heel type people or babyface type people. That freaking man superstar and Murdoch was freaking over. And I mean, like I told you about Funk and Slater, them two was so over. I worked against Slater in Cork and Hall, and like I said, I told you this before, but some of the matches with Funk, I've been in easier street fights. The same thing with Slater. Slater was a double tough son of a gun.
Yeah, all those guys you just named are built for that style. Like you said, where you go in there and you don't take, whatever you take, you're going to give it right back. And
right.
Every one of those guys you name, like you said, that's that's their thing. And you take a team like Gordy and Williams. I mean, they're just built for
right.
that Japanese style. Brody and Hanson, of course, they weren't around. Hanson was around, but Brody, of course, was gone before you started going there, because I think it was 88, I believe, when that happened with him. But you can go back and watch those tapes, and it's kind of it's funny because like you talk about how respectful the fans are, and like I say, they're real docile and they clap and all that. But also, like when Brody would come to the ring, they would rush him, and he'd start swinging that chain, and you'd see that chain like start taking some people down. And I remember watching those old tapes thinking, oh my God, I bet they got sued. But people who were there go, oh no. Like it was considered like like an honor to get plowed through by your favorite wrestler.
Yeah.
They thought that was great.
And to get hit with that chain. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure it had to hurt them and everything, but it was like a privilege or something. Like, when we do the thing, and that's what they ask me a lot about the Monster Series deals over there, and people don't really understand that, which I've never really talked about it that much or anything, but the way the Monster Series stuff got started with Leatherface and with Crypt Keeper and with Freddy Krueger and Jason the Terrible and all that, well, those movies would still come out in Japan. Mm-hmm. Well, the companies that put those movies out, this is where everything's so different from Japan and the States. In Japan, they would pay the wrestling office like to give them advertisement. With the advertisement that the wrestling office would give them, they would pick a guy and get one of us to wear like one of those outfits, and the movie company would pay the wrestling office. Now in the States, they want the wrestling office to pay the movie company, right?
Yeah.
But in Japan, it's right vice versa. And they would get us to dress up, and the movie people loved that. And then they would plug like in the arenas that the movies was coming out, like if it was coming out in 3 months or 4 months. But the movie people loved that. They thought it was the greatest advertisement in the world, which that's where Japan is so different than the United States as far as like the people that bought the shows. They would deal with the movie companies and everything, and the movie companies would pay them for us to use their characters. And I mean, which they'd always keep their characters over. Leatherface always stayed over. Freddy Krueger stayed over. Jason stayed over. The Crypt Keeper stayed over. All the monster gimmicks, I mean, they put them over good. But it's like you're talking about swinging the chain, doing things. I would chase the people and, I mean, actually grab them, Gene, some by the hair and stuff. And I mean, I'd seen people just tears rolling down their eyes and roll down their face and everything. I'd let them go. But I mean, but to them, I mean, there was like no lawsuits, like you were saying, as far as you hit somebody or something and everything. But they would run. I'd corner like 300 or 400 up in the corner of a building, and you would have thought I was a mass murderer going to kill them or something. And I laughed. Like different guys had went over there with me, like Tommy, that had never seen anything like that. He watched. I said, "Watch this, see what you think." He watched. He said, "I had never seen anything like that." But I mean, it was cool. It was a different, you know what I mean? That was a different time then. But like I said, it was just so different over there than it was in the States. And man, it was cool. But like I said, it was just people have always asked me about it, and it's different. But then again, it's just real. It was real rough, and I mean, it was real rough, and it was kind of a trip as far as the people and the gimmicks and everything. But I mean, we had good shows. I mean, we had good wrestlers. Like I said, the guys I just named are a who's who of Japanese wrestling that come for our office. And I mean, man, I had a good time, and the office drew a lot of money, and the office really took care of me. And I love Japan. I never had nothing. To me, I had great success over there.
That makes so much sense with the movie companies paying the wrestling company to have those characters. I mean, because you think now, especially now that they're putting more advertising on the ring, you got companies paying thousands of dollars to have the name of a movie on the apron or the name of a energy drink or whatever. But to have your character plugged into the show through a whole match and then promote the movie off that's it's crazy it never made it over here. But then again, the movie companies are afraid that the wrestling company might make a dime off of their intellectual property, and that can't have that.
You're exactly right. And it was just like I said, it was really cool. You're talking about funny, like when the show was over, then people were so scared to death of you out there. I mean, like I said, like a lot of them were, I'd say, crying in tears and hollering and everything. But then when the show was over, like we took the stuff off, we'd wear just the hood out. But you would have 100 people, Gene, that would wait outside and want to take a picture with you, and they didn't care how much. And I mean, because I wasn't even into charging people over there for anything and everything. Yeah. They say, like, please take a picture and just have a wad of money in their hand. And I'd tell some of them I'd take 3 or 4 pictures of somebody, but I would never take their money. And they would come, like I'd carry my wife over there with me. And we'd be staying in the office in Shinjuku, it's just a little suburb of Tokyo, and we'd stay right in Tokyo. Well, the first morning I took my wife down to breakfast, there was like a dozen people in the lobby, and they all had gifts. Well, when I went to walk by them, they said, "Doug's here." Well, the thing about it, we just got there like 2 days before that. Well, they kind of all know everything. Well, they knew I had my wife with me. They brought me a gift and her a gift. And they said, "Doug, will you take a picture with us?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll take a picture." I just took a picture, and they said, like they would say, like, how much or something. And I said, "Don't worry about it." But they bring you gifts. My wife told me after that first morning, she said, "They treat y'all like movie stars over here. It's like y'all aren't wrestlers." I said, "They're just really nice," which I'd always told her how nice the people was, and how respectful basically they was and everything. She said, "I've never seen wrestling fans just the ones that come to the hotel and just bring you gifts and just for you to take a picture with them." I said, "Well, they're, like I told you, they're a respectful bunch, So that really shocked her.
Absolutely. And, it's a combination of they're respectful and they hold the wrestling business in a very high regard over there, right? Like they don't look like here you have fans, but then the general public, there's a lot of people who look down their nose and go, oh, that's that wrestling or whatever. But from what I hear anyway, you'll know better than I do. But over there, just in general, the public perception of wrestling holds it in a lot higher regard, right? Is it maybe because of the physicality and the fact that they know that not just anybody can do that?
It is, and it's just the respect level, Gene. And the difference over there, too, is like when the guys get a little older and everything, here in the States, people kind of go more, that's just an old guy or something. Over there, the older you get, and now I look at it and I think, well, maybe a lot of it is just they respect you as far as for living, still being alive, being older. But I mean, for everything it is as rough as they've seen, and then when the guys get older, they even respect them more. I mean, I booked, like I carried him over there, not to wrestle, but just where the people could see him. I booked Gypsy Joe over there, and see, Gypsy was one of them guys that I was trying to think what the promotion was. It was World Wrestling something that was over there, but Gypsy was the king of the cage. They had this like cage tournament like in the freaking 70s or 80s or something. It was a new promotion, which you always had Inoki and Baba, but it was another promotion that started. I think it was WWA maybe it was called over there. But anyway, Gypsy Joe was like one of their main guys, and they had like I don't know, 6 or 8 cage matches, and Gypsy Joe wound up winning the whole thing, and they called him the king of the cage. Well, I booked Gypsy over there and give him a good, like he went for, I think I got him over there for like 2 months. He stayed straight. Like I would come home after 4 weeks, and then I'd stay home 3 weeks, something. I'd go back, and I had him where he could stay the whole 2 months because he wanted to go and everything. But man, he was super over, Gene. I mean, they loved him. Every building we'd go to, all we'd do is play some music, get him to go out and put his name thing across him and get him to go out to the ring, and they would announce him, and he'd bow to everybody, and everybody would pop, and they loved him. And like I said, Joe was older then, but the people loved him. Like I said, all the older stars that had really done something, that was a respect thing. And about heart, if they would say this about heart, you was a good fighter. Like if you was, strong and you went 20 and 30 minutes, them, that was, you was a strong fighter, and they would, they would respect you. But I mean, there's such respect and fans and respectful people, and Japan is so cool. Jim, was my buddy, David Rich, he's over there right now. He told me he'd always told his family he wanted to take him, which I'd tell him, and I've told you this before, I wish everybody had a chance to go to Japan and just, I mean, it's so clean and so nice, and the people are so respectful. And David took his family over there. They're over there this week, and he'd sent me a couple of texts yesterday, but he's having a good time, which, you got Disneyland over there, and he took his daughter over there and his wife and everything, so they're having a big time.
Well, that's cool. I'm glad they're getting to do that, because that's a very unique experience.
Yeah. And I thought I was very fortunate, Gene, when you get to go, like I said, I think I went 56 times or something like that, 56 to 60 times. I got 3 passports. I think it's about full, and I've added pages to all of them. But man, it's a great thing when I love the wrestling business anyway, but when you love what you're doing and you get to travel all over the world doing it, and you get to meet, I met a bunch of great friends over there in Japan that I still communicate with today and everything. And like, as far as the wrestlers that I met, that was so great. We was just the other night, me and Tommy was talking about Kabuki. The last 5 years that I went over there, Kabuki was the Japanese booker for the wrestling office that I booked for also. Me and him was real tight. We'd go to the office together a lot. Then we'd travel together and everything. And man, he was one of my, he's one of my favorites. He's a class guy.
Now, famously on this show, it's been discussed at length at different times. I've made one trip on a plane in my life back in May, Atlanta to Philadelphia, a little over an hour and a half. Tell us about the plane ride from America to Japan, because that's where things get tough. That is one heck of a trip.
Right. Well, I'll tell you a few different of my destinations as far as going, which we changed airlines about every 6 or 7 years. When we started out, when I was going on, you remember when Northwest Airlines was around, right? We'd go from Northwest from Memphis to Minneapolis, Minneapolis, St. Paul to Narita, and to Minneapolis is 3.5 hours or so, and then you jump on from Minneapolis on another 14 hours from Minneapolis to Narita. Then after Northwest, what was it? It was Delta that bought out Northwest, right? We went from Northwest to the company to American. American had our wrestling office got a deal with American, and what was really cool is because we bought so many tickets. They'd fly us all business or first class and everything. But I went so much, Gene. I got to know the stewardess pretty well as far as just getting on the plane and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They'd see you. If you're going every month, every 2 months, you kind of got the same people a lot of the time, and that kind of got comfortable because you know who you're going with. But the whole deal, you're going to be on the plane from American. What we would do, we'd go American, we'd go Memphis, Dallas, straight to Narita. And to me, that was cool because Memphis, Dallas is not but an hour flight, hour 10 minutes. So it's just you're up in the air, you're down. And me, I was never a big, and you're going to laugh about this, never a big airplane, like as far as their food that they cook. So what I would always do, any airport I was in, whether like with Northwest, it was in Minneapolis, and for American, it was in Dallas usually, I would always go and buy me there's Burger King and McDonald's in the Dallas airport. Well, Burger King, I'd get like 2 chicken sandwiches or something and some fries. Well, then when we'd be in the air about 5 hours, one of the stewards would come by, and like I said, we was in business, and I'd say, hey, can you put this in the microwave for me? And they'd take it and put it, but like I said, you pretty much knew you was flying so much, you kind of knew most of them and everything. They'd be real nice to you and everything. But now, a lot of guys, I do like that. And Gene, I'll have a drink every once in a blue moon, or sometimes if I want to. But I was never a big drinker. But now a lot of the guys that would get on flights with me, they would say, look, this first 5 hours, I'm fixing to drink. Well, they'd wind up drinking about 2 hours and pass out and sleep about 5 hours, and they'd wake up. Then they'd start drinking again. Then they'd pass out, and by the time they woke up the next time, we'd be there. And that was the logic to make that flight shorter. But me, I'd do something. I'd read books and mess with different things and everything. But man, it was just, you just realized you was going to be on there 18 hours. Just one of them deals. I'm going to be on this flight. I'm going to be on this one 14 hours, this one 3.5 hours. But it's just one of them deals. You had to get your mindset right and everything. And I was on a lot of flights, Gene, with military people. So I decided one day, every once in a while I think, damn, I want to go because I love Japan. But, you think, but I'm fixing to be here for a month. And then I realized one day I was talking to a couple of the military guys, and they told me it was 12 months before they could come home the first time. Wow. And I thought, boy, we're a bunch of big wusses, ain't we? Here we are going to complain about 3 or 4 weeks, because I used to tell people I could do a tour in my sleep, but what I was talking about was a month. I don't care how bad it is, who you had to work with. And Gene, we had to work with guys a lot of nights that were freaking, like I said, it was all about heart, and they wanted to make sure the people believed their stuff. It was about to take your head off and everything, but it was like I said, it was very rough and everything, but you knew what you was getting into. I'd rather it be rough and me not have to worry about no politics. And if I heard something, I heard it and it'd get better, than I would having to deal with all the politics. To me, it was kind of cool, just you working hard and busting your butt and then not having to deal with so many politics.
Yeah, I can see where that would definitely be a plus. Talking about the work aspect, did many of the Japanese wrestlers speak English at all?
No, I would say a little less than a quarter could speak broken up English. But they're when I say broken up English, I mean they might have really knew 6 words. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was not. Which the funny thing, the first time I went, which I laughed, which Frank Morrell told me this, he said, Dougie, you know the first words you need to learn, don't you? I said, what's that, Frank? He said, you need to learn how to say bathroom, and you need to learn how to say what you want to eat. Or you laugh. First thing I got over was Frank didn't know how to say them either. So first thing I got over, I said, how you say bathroom or restroom? And they said, bathroom? I said, yeah, how do you say in Japanese bathroom? Because I didn't know, some of them guys might not be
Yeah.
around. And they said, Benjo. And I said, so Benjo is bathroom or restroom? They said, Benjo. So I had that down. I thought, well, I ain't going to have to go. I ain't going to not be able to get to the bathroom. And then I asked him, I said, we went to one of the first restaurants first night I was there, and I said, what is this? I asked one of the guys that was pretty good English. He said, that's pork on rice. I said, what is it called? Japanese, what is it called? And he said, katsudon. I said, and it is pork on rice, right? It had an egg on top of it and like a little pork chop about this big around, and then rice underneath it. And I said, katsudon. He said, yeah, katsudon. So I had the Benjo to go to, and I knew what I wanted to eat, katsudon, a pork chop on top of some rice with egg on it.
You mentioned it earlier, but like a destination for American wrestlers, especially going to Japan, Ribera Steakhouse. I know a lot of people they've seen, especially you over the years, wearing the jacket. They've heard some stories about it, but tell us about the Ribera Steakhouse and how it became so renowned with professional wrestlers.
Man, I love Ribera. I love Ribera. I was trying to think of the son's name, but there's two Riberas. There's one that the dad runs, which is the smaller one, and the one that we go to that the son run. And I've got one of my buddies that does some work with me a lot. He just come back. His wife goes over there, and she works for, I think it's Komatsu maybe, and he went over there with her, and he said, Doug, you're not going to believe this. I said, I probably won't. What is it? He said, I went in a restaurant and they had your picture up on the wall. I said, well, I bet that scared the heck out of you, didn't it? He started laughing. He said, no, he said, they love wrestling. He said, so I asked him, I said, have you ever heard of Doug Gilbert? And he said, come here. And he said, I got up from the table and we walked 2 tables over and he pointed up on the wall and he said, there was my picture. And I laughed because he's a real cool guy. He's my buddy and everything. He said, Doug, he said, I tell people now, I said, I went to Japan and my buddy's picture's on the wall. I started laughing. I said, man, I'm glad. I said, did you enjoy yourself? He said, oh, yeah, man, they got the best steak. I said, oh, yeah, we go in there. But how it started, Gene, as I was told, was Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen was out walking around one night. And they went in there. Now, the son is my friend, which I know his dad, and he's real cool too. But now, in his dad's, there's just about 10 bar stools, and like 10 people can get in there and get shoulder to shoulder. And the son's, it's like more like an American restaurant, which he's got like 8 tables in there, then a bar stool thing up there, about 10 seats. And the son in his restaurant, Gene, has got a big screen TV, and the only thing he shows on the big screen TV is wrestling shows.
Oh, nice.
And I mean, like Tokyo Dome shows, Cork and Hall shows, but just he'll put tape in or a DVR, and the only thing he shows when he's open is wrestling. The only thing on the walls of his steakhouse is pictures of the wrestlers. I mean, and it's so cool. And the outside of it is the same way. Like when you're looking through his windows, you can't see through his windows because there's just pictures of all the boys that have come to Japan on there, and it's Ribera Steakhouse, and it's just really cool. The kid's really cool. Like, and you'll laugh. Me and him got to be real good buddies. I'd carry him. He loved Nike shoes, and like he'd always tell me, he'd look at my shoes, so I'd always 3 or 4 different pairs of shoes that I'd wear in there and stuff. And I wound up, I'd carry him because he'd give us jackets and he'd give me shirts. Hell, I had a pair of pants that said Ribera on it. Like I'd have the shirts and jackets.
Yeah.
Most people just had the jackets. He gave me a shirt that had their emblem on, a pair of pants that had their emblem on it. So I kind of had a whole wardrobe. I still do. I've got, I think, 6 Ribera jackets now, and I've got 2 or 3 that was my brother's put in another closet over here. That's really cool. But man, like I said, me and him was real good buddies and everything. But it's cool, you know. I mean, people. And I said, "What size shoe you wear?" And he told me, and when I bought me a pair of shoes here, I just bought him a pair too, and I carried them, give them to him. And you thought me and him we was good buddies and everything, but he'd always, anytime we was near Tokyo, and we wrestled that night, which they'd stay open like 11 or 12 or something, which we come in, they stay open later. But man, he was so cool with me. Like I'd go in there and whatever we wanted. But the whole, back to the question you asked was how did we learn about it, everybody start going there? Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen was out walking around. Well, they wanted something to eat. They walked in this place where it happened to be my buddy's dad at the first Rivera. And I think he was a big wrestling fan also, and he really liked Brody and Hansen, and he brought him out of state, and it's about this freaking big gene. So Brody and Hansen loved that, and I think he charged them like $20 or something. And in Japan, everything's high, right? So that's the cheapest it could be. He brought them a big steak out, rice, just everything they wanted. And I mean, he asked them, did they want more? Well, after that, Brody and Hansen started bringing some of their friends with him to his. And then, like I said, he opened the restaurant for his son. Then a lot of us started going there. And his son, like, it's just totally restaurant. It's totally wrestling restaurant. Man, it's freaking good. Like I said, my buddy just went. He went about, I think it's 3 or 4 months ago, but I popped when he got back because he didn't tell me when he was over there. When he got back, he told me, man, I went somewhere, and he said, I couldn't believe it. I said, what? He said, there's wrestling stuff everywhere. Well, I almost said Rivera when he said that. And he said, but the guy told me, I told him I knew you and I was your friend. He said, he told me to come here. He said, he took me back 2 tables, and he said, I pointed right up to the side of the wall right before the ceiling. He said, right there was a picture of you. And I said, well,
that's awesome. Did you ever think when you first started wrestling, Tennessee boy would have his picture hanging on the wall in a steakhouse in Japan?
Oh, no. And that's what I tell all them when I was messing with you about them posters behind you, which I tell people, I'd say, now, they don't keep your picture up there all the time. They just wait till you're going to call and come in. And they say, hold on, let's stick that back up. But like I said, my buddy, he's real cool. And you know who he was really cool with was his dad, and the son also was Hawk and Animal. They had a wardrobe like I'd wear the Rivera jackets and stuff. They'd have Zubaz, which Hawk and Animal would give them. Hawk and Animal owned, I think it's 80% of that at the get-go and everything, and they was real big. They would fly to Minneapolis and see Hawk and Animal stay like a week.
Wow.
So that's kind of that relationship and how wrestlers got involved. Like I said, at the get-go, it was Hansen and Brody that just stopped in there. And then, like I said, they started carrying guys and Hawk and Animal and then all the rest of us. But, man, it's a cool getaway, Gene. You know how when you're somewhere, and especially overseas, or like if you're somewhere, I don't even care, like if we're from South and you're up north and you kind of just, you kind of rather be at home, just somewhere that you can go in and it feels comfortable and everything. That's the way Rivera is. I mean, for the boys anyway.
That's what I was going to say. I would imagine when you said that they were out walking around and that place caught their eye, I'm sure that logo with the big longhorn is probably what drew them in. Like, hey, let's go check this out. 2 guys from Texas stomping around.
Probably so. But what about that, Jim? When they went in, there was not a picture of a wrestler or a picture of nothing. And now they're like wrestling type restaurants. I mean, as far as if you see it, like you see the one that I go to, the bigger one, I mean, all you can see around the front of it and the side of it is just pictures of wrestlers from the 70s on. I mean, it's really cool. I'd love to take you over there and you'd go in and see it. I think you'd really like it.
I'd love that.
Well, look, if I go into any like wrestling type person, I go in, I still look at everything. I mean, I've been in it 1,000 times, and I still love to just look at the different pictures, all the different guys and everything.
Yeah, because there's been some big stars go over there, and guys who became big stars over there that maybe weren't before they went. So
hey, I carried our buddy in there with us about 4 or 5 times. He had a good time. He drank quite a few beers over there.
I bet he did. And
I told him one time. Hey, I told him one time, Gene, you're gonna laugh, but I think, did we tell you the time about us getting in a taxi and the taxi cab driver? He said, "You pro wrestler?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was pointing back. I was in the back seat, and there was another guy. Remember Dr. Luther, Lenny Olson? Well, he was in the back seat with me. He said, "You pro wrestler?" And Dr. Luther said, "Yeah." And he looked at Tommy, and he pointed at him. He said, "What you?" And Tommy said, "Pro wrestler." And he said, "No, you're not pro wrestler. You singer? You rock star or something?" Tommy told him he's Bon Jovi. I laughed. I laughed. You talking about funny? He was funny. We had some times, but then the guy asked Tommy. This was like 2 nights later when we was out eating, and he asked Tommy said, you in magazine? And Tommy said, yeah, I'm in the magazine. He'd had about, I don't know, 6-8 beers of them tall boys, you know, the quarts. And he said, Doug, what's the name of that magazine I did that story for? Which the magazine did come to do a story with him. And I looked at Tommy, I said, it was called Okie Chimpo, Tommy. So he looked at the guy and he said, it's Okie Chimpo magazine. You read it? And that guy looked at him and he looked at him, Tommy said, what'd you tell me to tell him? I said, I told him use them Big Dick magazine. I said, that's what you told him, which Chimpo meant big and Okie meant big. And you talking about Tommy got fired up at me about that. But I laughed. You talking about funny. I thought, this is something. You talking about, you've seen Tommy look at me before, like, what are you saying?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
I said, I was just playing. I said, I didn't mean nothing by it. I thought, I didn't even know what the magazine was, but the magazine did come to the wrestling show one night. And, you know, we'd have to do different articles and let them take pictures with them and everything. And we actually, one of the funny things you popped about, Gene, was me and Tommy had to go to do like a daily show, you know, like the morning shows that we have on here. Well, they'd call the office every once in a while, want a couple of us to come. Me and Tommy went and done a couple of them, and they was funny because, I mean, we'd have a little translator with us, but he didn't speak much English either. So Tommy said, "Why they want?" I said, "I don't know. We just go along with it. It don't matter, just long." But it was good, you know, just to be on TV over there is a big thing, Jim, because there's not that much TV as far. I mean, there's a bunch of channels, but they didn't plug many offices on. Like All Japan had a TV, New Japan had TV, but they was both on like at 11 o'clock and midnight, you know. But people still watched them. I mean, they would record them or they would stay up and watch them and everything. It was great ratings for them, but no other office had TV.
Oh my gosh, I wish we had footage of that. It just, when you said that, it made me think of that old Saturday Night Live sketch where Chris Farley is on this Japanese game show and he doesn't know what they're saying and he keeps getting all this terrible stuff done to him. I just wondered when you said that, I just picture Tommy on that Japanese talk show and no idea what they're telling him and they don't know what he's telling them.
Exactly. And I just tell him smile and shake his head. But that taxi cab driver saying, "No, you rock and roll singer." I laughed. I thought Tommy thinks you get hot.
Bon Jovi, that is tremendous. You always hear people talk about in Japan how there's sponsors and you have these fans and different people that sponsor the wrestlers. What? Tell us what that's all about.
Well, the deal was, Gene, what everybody didn't really realize, which is the difference, but you know, people would say the Yakuza paid for wrestling, which Yakuza is like the mafia, right? But I mean, in Japan it's different. I mean, they say the Yakuza is over all sports as far as baseball, wrestling, and everything, but I don't think the Yakuza is quite the same as umpteen years ago, and I don't think it's kind of the same as the mafia. But what it was businessmen that bought sports and what they would do, they would sell, you know, a allotment of tickets to different businesses. And I'd heard people say before, well, the businesses was made by them. I don't know if they was actually made, but it was businessmen that run sports is what it was. But they would buy like you'd have one that would buy like 3 months worth of shows for Baba, one that would buy like 3 months worth of shows from Inoki. Then we had our guys, and the good thing, Mr. Sano, which was the owner of my company, before he broke out on his own, he would buy 4 months worth of shows from Baba every year, just himself. So see, he had an idea of what wrestling and promoting was about. Because like I said, for the 6 or 8 years before he started IWA, he bought 4 months worth of shows every year from Baba. So he basically promoted. I mean, Baba was the owner, but he would promote those towns for over 4 months and everything to get those to draw. And they would always draw, and they drew good money. Well, then he was ready to start his own promotion, and he did. And he called it IWA Japan and everything, the International Wrestling Association. So, and he was a great guy. He was always really good to me. He just passed away last year, Gene, but he was a great guy. Like his name was Mr. Sano.
You know, you've mentioned a couple of times how, you know, you had the top two promotions. You had indie promotions, but the top two was Inoki and Baba. And of course, you know, back in the States, you know, you had WWF and WCW, and before that, WWF and Jim Crockett. Was there a promotional war type thing? Like, was there the same kind of tension between the two there, like we had here?
They kind of would be, Gene, because you had guys going back and forth, like, from WWF, WCW, when contracts were out, you have guys kind of jump. Well, you kind of have the same thing for the top guys with Inoki and the top guys with Baba. If they'd kind of get tired or they didn't think they was using them right, they would negotiate contracts, and you'd have one or two jump this side, one or two jump the other. That was the top two. Then let me say the third during all these years I was over there was probably FMW, which was Onita. And then the fourth would have been IWA Japan, which was the company that I worked for years. And then you had all the different companies like Big Japan. And then when Noah started, Noah jumped up there to a third, probably jumped over FMW and IWA. But Noah, when I was trying to think, the Tiger Mask, what was his name? The one that passed away in the ring. Gene, the one that suplex. What was? He wore the green long tights,
yeah,
and the guy
with the white stripe. I can picture him plain as day. I'm blanking out on his name.
Yeah,
Mizawa.
Yeah, and when they opened up, like I said, they jumped automatically to third, and almost probably went to a second, which they had a great backing sponsor. They had a TV deal that they got, and they had big money behind them and everything, and that was real good. But like what I'm saying, then say you got 5 promotions. Let's say it would say All Japan, New Japan, Noah when it opened, FMW, IWA. Then you had another dozen or 12 just at different parts of Japan promotions that guys that were over. This guy would start one over here and this one over here, so it kind of got not nearly as, I don't say as bad as the States, and I don't mean bad, but I mean when you got a promotion on every block, but you wind up going from having like 2 promotions to 4 promotions to 5, and then all over Japan, you had about another dozen that would just be kind of from this town to this town over here. But I mean, it wound up being a lot of wrestlers, but when over the years, when you've had so many wrestlers, you've got them that's not with certain companies anymore. It's kind of independent. But what's kind of cool about that I thought was, if somebody was really overhand and drew money, I could call that guy or get like Kabuki to call that guy. He could make shows for us, and it was kind of a good deal. Because all the guys like I would usually book, we would have to fly from somewhere here in the States, and then we'd have to give them a freaking good guarantee and everything. So it was very costly, but the only thing we made a lot of money because the shows were paid for before anybody come in. Like I said, the shows were bought. And it was bought by the guys, which people would say the mafia, Yakuza. I wasn't really I never really believed that, which I mean, it's kind of sort of true, but I don't think it's like everybody thinks, because they would take me out. Like if I was there 7 nights, like 4 nights out of the week, they would take me out and to go out and eat and drink whatever I wanted. And I could take a friend with me or whoever I'd booked. I'd bring a couple of them with me. I'd always take Tommy with me. Anything they wanted to drink, anything you wanted to eat. I mean, it didn't matter what you wanted. It was took care of. You didn't have to worry about it. You was always taken care of. You never have to worry about anybody messing with you. And like I said, to me, it was a very comfortable deal to be involved in.
Right. And, people hear Japanese mafia, they hear the word mafia, so they're picturing like Tony Soprano or the Goodfellas or something like that. But that's not really what we're talking.
But now, this one thing, Gene. Now, there was at certain nights in certain parts of Japan that a few of them would come around. everybody'd have their suits on and everything. I'd look down every once in a while. One of them wouldn't have a finger or two, and that was their thing. They said, if you ever done something wrong, you get that's what old Tiger Jet singing. All them older guys tell me, said, you know what happened to them guys that don't have fingers, don't you? I said, no, what? When I first went over, they said, that's the ones that messed up. And I thought, oh my goodness. But I mean, I was always respectful to all of them. And what was real cool, like there was one of them, and he was one of the big bosses, and he really liked me. And he talked to me about golf and everything. Well, I talked to him about golfing, and he'd tell me he went and played. And I showed him one night, I brought 2 putters and like a dozen golf balls, and I'd get out in our hotel down the hall, and I'd set like a cup or something down there, and I'd set the balls down, which we might drink a beer or 2 or something while we're doing it, but then we just put just different things just to kill the time, And I wound up bringing that guy a driver, like in those days, like the Big Bertha was the cool drivers from over here. Well, I carried that guy a driver. You could thought I'd give him $1 million. But it was just like, I think to him, it was like a respect thing. Like I respect him, everything. Man, anytime I ever seen that guy or any of his people, they'd ask me, did I need anything? But it's somehow just little stuff. To me, that was a little thing, but for them, it was like, it like meant the world to them. So I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's such a different culture over there.
And you know, another guy that was cool that I was around was Tarzan Godo. Do you remember Tarzan Godo?
Yeah, I remember when they came through in the 80s, you know, it was, I think he taken was a Kiyosato, you know.
Well, I was fixing to ask you, did you remember another guy? And that's what I was fixing to tell you. He was for about a 2-year period, one of the Japanese bookers over there for our office was a Kiyosato from Kansas City. And man, I loved him. He was a super classy, respectful, nice dress guy. But I mean, that could work and was like one of the real mat wrestlers, you know.
And that was the thing they used to do back in the day, right? These guys would, when they were quote unquote young boys, as they refer to them, and over there, you know, rookie wrestlers, but they would do these tours of America and go to a few different territories. I remember Chono in like 87, 88. I remember we've talked about before, Onita, you know, came through Memphis. Hashimoto, I think, came through Memphis at some
point. You know
point.
who the first one that brought Chono over here was, right?
No. Was it Eddie?
Yeah. This is my brother to Alabama. That would probably been the first place you saw him.
That's absolutely the first place I saw him. He came in by himself, and then he teamed with Mike Davis, which I always thought was a fun pairing.
You know who talked to Eddie about Chono?
You?
No, actually, Tokyo Joe. It was before I went to Japan.
Oh yeah, that would have been a couple years prior. Yeah.
Remember me telling you I called Tokyo Joe about going the first few times, but Tokyo Joe was the guy, and he would do stuff for Bob Onoki, but he was kind of an independent guy. But both offices would pay him to get their guys to different places, and it would get them over as far as in the States and Mexico and everything. But Tokyo Joe was an older gentleman that was super. He was a super smart guy that had a lot of connections in wrestling, but he really liked Eddie, and he had Eddie's number. And anytime Eddie could do something for him or help him out, he would. But like I said, that's how Chono made it. You know, got here to Alabama to get his start kind of in the United States.
I can remember seeing a bunch of those guys in the territories, and then later you'd read about them being like Muda, same thing, you know.
And if you remember, Gene, if you remember any of the Memphis TVs when you saw the Japanese guys during these years, I would get them from our office and bring them over here, and they would stay a month, 2 months, 3 months, or whatever. And, you know, I would kind of take care of them. They'd live with me and go on the road. I'd make sure that they had a ride. You know, they'd basically stay with me and everything. But it was the thing about getting them over here to the States and getting them, I mean, because that made them more like stars in Japan.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it certainly serves them well because it's learning a whole different style than what they're going to learn, which in Japan, you know, like here, we're not necessarily, we won't talk about now because now anybody could just show up somewhere and get in a ring and be a wrestler. But, you know, back then, you know, guys would find a way to break into the business, and it was tough, but it was even tougher over there, right? Through those dojos over there, like it was a long road for those guys to actually get in the ring, right?
Here's the thing, Gene, you're going to laugh at this, but the whole time that I'd bring guys over here, I had a building, and it was right up on Court Square in Lexington, and I had a ring set up in it, and I had curtains across the windows just so people would come up and knock on the door every once in a while. If I was in the ring or I was out of the ring, I had weights in there, bikes and everything, and I'd go open the door, and they'd say, well, what's going on in here? I'd say, we're doing a little wrestling. Well, can we watch? I said, nah, they don't really want anybody in here. But I would every night we was off, I would carry the Japanese guys up to the ring and the gym, and we would work out, and I'd have some of my buddies come up there and work out with them and everything. And to them, that was a huge deal. The office loved it because we'd take pictures, and they'd send some photographers sometime and take pictures. But I'd get some of the boys that was real respected in Japan and shoot pictures, and to them, they, you know, that was one of the best things in the world as far as experience, and them getting the American training is what they would call it and everything. But what was so cool too, that they would get the Memphis tapes like the TV. I'd shoot them a tape and everything, and they'd put it on some of those day shows, like I was talking about, just clips of it and everything. That was a big deal over there. And too, the cool thing was like a lot of the guys that they seen, that the people in Japan seen on WWE's TV. That's when WWE, you know, when Lawler was doing his. I mean, he's doing the commentary, but when he was doing the angle with Vince, where Vince would come up here and be a heel, you know, he had never been on TV before, but they would get to work against like a lot of WWE's guys. So that was a big deal, you know, back over there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's still more stuff that I want to talk to you about Japan. We didn't get to any of the matches and stuff, so we'll put a bow on this one because we're about out of time, and we will definitely be talking more because it's certainly, you've done more stuff, and there's definitely more stories to tell from Japan than we could do in one episode.
I was fixing to say, Gene, we didn't even talk about me being in my first ever bomb match and getting blowed up about 6 or 8 foot in the air. We got to talk about that sometime.
Definitely. I want to talk to you at length about Onita bringing that style of wrestling to Japan and how it evolved and what fans and promoters thought of it. Because here, you know, not on a regular basis, but even WWE at times would implement some of those things. They would set a table on fire, or they'd have some thumbtacks. But I don't think that Inoki or Baba ever implemented any of that into their wrestling over there. So,
no, I think they kind of stayed away. Which, you know, it's that thing where how can you go that far and have something to go further with? But I think the offices, Onita and the wing, also IWA office, we all did approach different things like that, but I think they just kind of stayed away from it, and they went the strong style route. Which, like I said, the good thing about our office, IWA, I wound up with the offspring over guys that was done over. So like I said, the Funk, Slaters, Superstars, Murdoch, Terry Gordy. I mean, when you start naming names like that, Dan Severn, like I got a magazine here that's got like 12 or 14 of what I would say was the top guys I booked, which I booked probably about 150 different guys go over there, but there's like 20 or 30 that just drew a ton of money before I ever got a hold of them, you know, for Inoki and Baba. And man, those guys are just, to me, legends over there.
Well, I find that all very fascinating. I can't wait for us to revisit this topic again. But like I say, we're out of time for now, so I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this edition up. And next week we'll see if I can do it on the right night. We'll have Tommy Becker with us.
Hey, listen, Gene, thanks and everything. I guarantee you Tommy's out on the beach somewhere and everything, so we'll see him next week and everything. But, man, I hope you get to feeling better and everything. And, listen, thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will see y'all next week. Peace. We're out.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
In the heart of Tennessee, born with pride, Doug and Tommy taking rings in stride. Memphis legends never backing down, wrestling warriors, they wear the crown. You scurry away, glory in their veins, fighting legends breaking chains. In the square circle they made their name, podcast champions, it's their claim to fame. On the mic they roar, on the map they soar, dangerous conversations, fans wanting more. Podcast kings ruling the waves, Memphis wrestling raising the stakes. From title belts to Hall of Fame, Doug and Tommy carved the name. Fists of fury and hearts of gold. Every story, every fight retold. Tales of glory, laughter, cry. Tales see warriors with hearts open wide. In the ring or on the air, legends living without a care. On the mic they roar, on the mat they soar. Dangerous conversations, fans wanting more.